is Campfire Chats, another episode, this time with someone that we have never, we don't know personally. I've only met him once, but he is like a very cool, very accomplished, lifelong outdoorsman. And I found him really inspiring. And Vicky, I think you're going to too, because you've never met the guy. So.
Never met him. This is weird. We were just saying like everyone else has either been like, well, everyone that's been on this show has been a friend. So
like a very close personal friend. So we're doing like the opposite end of things, and we're like opening it up a little bit more. So let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's intro him in. Yeah, do you want to say a little bit about him?
Absolutely. His name's Perriard. He is an outdoor enthusiast, life full of running, backpacking, cycling, skiing, canoeing, and some highlights like this is really impressive. So backpacking trips all over Canada, like the Yukon, the Grand Canyon, Iceland, a top 10 finish in a 7-day ultra race in Chile, in a desert in Chile, which is crazy. Loves Halliburton's 100-mile trail race, trying to wrap my head around that, and participated in the Canadian Ski Marathon for a 28-year streak.
What? 2 and 3 years old.
So let's welcome to Campfire Chats, Perriard.
Hello.
I love how you started the chat like this.
It's my attempt at seeming young.
I love it.
Rial, we were just talking about your 28-year streak on the Canadian Ski Marathon, and Vicky's like, we were barely alive when you like started doing that.
It is, for a lot of years, it was kind of my it defined my year. Everything was planned around the ski marathon. You know, I would just try to get in shape so I could go do the ski marathon one more time. And I can't believe it now because I look back and it's like, what just happened?
It's very impressive. I just want to first off say hi. I'm Vicky. Nice to meet you. This is like a very interesting way of
say hello, Vicky.
Yeah. I guess you and Marianne have met before, but I said to Marianne, I knew your name from Strava because I always saw you like pop up on Strava, and I was like, who is this guy? And then Marianne was like, this is the next person that we should interview. So funny small world moment.
Yes, indeed. And this goes as to this is how we meet in real life right now in 2020. So anyway, nice to meet you. I have noticed you on Strava, and it's one of these things where thank you to the internet age.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. All right. So we've got, a couple of questions for you. So we're just going to jump right into it. My first question is, so it's very clear, like Marianne just gave your intro, you've had a lifelong passion for the outdoors. Mm-hmm. So how has hiking specifically, because we're hike addicts, played into this passion, lifelong passion?
So probably, in my early years, I was in Boy Scouts, back in, dare I say, the 70s. And I had this thing where I just love, in today's world, you can step into your car, either in your garage or underground parking, and you can go to work and you barely experience things outside of your AC and your heat in the winter. And we have this amazing body that's, meant to be outside and experience all this variety. And in my younger days, because of scouting, probably I spent a lot of time outside. And there's the scenery aspect of being outside where the world is very different than the concrete that we live in this city. And I just enjoyed like feeling and seeing things. And then in terms of hiking, it was kind of the obvious way was, how do I see more of it? And by traveling through the wilderness, whether it's in Western Canada or in different places, I got this opportunity to experience my body, experience different things. And then also this idea that you can go and see a little bit more. And instead of seeing it with a car, it's kind of funny, in my early days, I did a lot of cycle touring. And so I used to travel through North America by bicycle, again, back in the kind of the 80s. And I used to like it because you travel slower than by car. And hiking takes that to another level where you absorb things more slowly. And, it just becomes part of you more. So that's kind of like the link between hiking and, and the outdoors. And of course, kind of tied into running as well. So when I was younger, I can't say I was that clever, but I had this idea that one day I was going to get older, and I really loved hiking. And I thought, when I get older, it's going to be harder to do because I'm going to be older. And, you know, back in the 80s, when you were in your 50s and 60s, you were considered, I think, older than you are in today's world, because there's more and more fit people now that are like kind of my generation, I guess. And I had this fear that I wouldn't be able to go hiking. And so I launched into running as this way of saying, if I keep running, one day when I get older, you know, I kind of had this loose idea that I would be fit enough and I would be able to hike into my 60s. And suddenly here we are. And, you know, it's probably not that I was that smart, but it was a good thing to do. And I did it. And now, you know, I can still carry a big backpack and I could still go out in the wilderness. And I have this luxury where I feel very fortunate that I'm comfortable being outside. Because I know for a lot of folks, they didn't necessarily, you know, have the upbringing that I had and the opportunities when I was young, where I was in Boy Scouts, and it introduced me to, you know, being in the forests at night and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how they link.
I think Vicky and I can really relate to just slowing down when it comes, like we both like trail run and run, but there's something about hiking when you slow down and you observe and you chat and you're able to like really dig deep into that. That is why we love it so much.
Yeah. And there is this thing about, you know, in today's world, we're so connected. And, you know, of course I have a cell phone, but when I quit my job early on, for a couple of years, I purposely went without a cell phone. And then of course it didn't really become manageable because it is today's world. But when I would go hiking in the 90s and in the early 2000s, you know, when cell phones were definitely out, people thought that it was really strange that I would not take a cell phone with me. It didn't seem safe and responsible. And yet what I liked is this idea of slowing down and being disconnected and just being able to, you know, live in the moment and not have this distraction that electronic devices do distract us a little bit. You know, they add value, but there's a cost to it as well.
When it comes to, we're talking about running, also there's construction just outside of my house. I'm not sure if you can hear it or not, speaking of distractions. But speaking of running and racing, like you somehow settled into these multi-day adventure races, over 100-mile runs. Tell us one of your highlight races and what are the rewards and challenges that come along with those?
And so I could probably, I feel obliged to go summer, winter here, because things are so different in the winter than the summer. And so kind of continuing on that theme, that, you know, the more I ran outside, the more I kind of fell in love with it. And I actually saw, you know, an ad in a Patagonia magazine from way back, where there was this thing called a 100-mile race. It was like, well, what on earth is that? And I kind of became, I don't want to say obsessed, but I had this kind of fantasy dream that was way out there. And then suddenly it happened, and I started to do, you know, longer and longer stuff. And suddenly there was this idea that I could run maybe 100 miles. And so there's a famous race called Marathon des Sables that I wanted to do. It's a 7-day race. I didn't do it because I got injured. It's one of the things where you have to be, you know, pretty careful with these things, especially when you have a day job and sitting down at a desk all day. And but instead I went to Chile in a desert called Atacama, and I raced it was a 7-day race where you ran roughly about 7 hours a day. And you had to carry all your calories and your sleeping bag and some basic gear with you. And, you know, people look at that and say, well, you know, that's pretty challenging. And of course it was a very arduous thing to do. But the hardest thing is probably preparing for it, especially when, you know, most of us are regular folk with a day job. You know, you have to go to work, you have to sit at a desk, and you have to carve your life in a way that, you know, that would allow you to do this. And part of what happened, I think, is my passion for doing these things was big enough that I was able to kind of structure my life where I found a way of running at lunchtime, running to work in the morning, and kind of developing good, you know, time management skills. And of course, Atacama being, you know, it's in Chile, so it's not in your backyard. And so the beauty of the scenery, you know, I think you've done some hiking in, you know, on other continents, right? And Canada is, of course, a beautiful country, and I love Canada. But it's nice to get other perspectives, you know, by going to other events and other locations to do hiking or climbing or, you know, whatever it might be. And so being in Chile for, you know, for a week of running was just, it was fabulous. And I got injured training for it again. And so that made it, it kind of made it super special that I had to overcome a lot of personal adversity because I was injured through the, you know, through the event. That's probably like one of the more special events, probably because also, I hate to say it this way because it doesn't sound healthy, but I suffered a lot through the event. And I think sometimes, you know, I'm not a masochist and I don't think suffering is good. The reality though is sometimes discomfort and that we don't get to have in our lives because we have so much in North America. Sometimes we miss on opportunities to feel something. And because I was running there injured and the conditions were, you know, were harsh, it was hot and very dry landscape. When it was done, the reward and the satisfaction, you know, was huge inside me. I was like so content that I had done this. So that was one of the main ones. And excuse me.
We all have big bottles. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm planning a run later, so I can't afford to go to Gatineau Park finally.
Oh, nice.
The Canadian Ski Marathon is kind of my winter event that, you know, you mentioned earlier. And I always like talking about it because, you know, I've done it for 30 years in a row. And so now it could seem a little bit, I go there and it's a bit matter of fact, you know, it is ski marathon one more time. I know what to do and I've done this and, you know, I just go and do it. But, you know, probably for the first 10 years, it was kind of a big defining moment for me to do the Canadian Ski Marathon. And when I first did it, I never imagined that I could be this person that would actually ski for 2 days, 100 miles. And eventually, you know, you carry your stuff and you sleep outside on the Saturday. And I used to kind of look at, you know, geez, people do this, you know, wow. And then slowly, you know, it didn't happen like this, but putting in the work, suddenly I was that person. And it's kind of corny to say, but it changed my life, you know, in a way, because I kind of became a slightly different person, a bit less of a couch potato, you know, got just, and as I said earlier, I had to get ready for it in the early years. Now I could do it more matter of fact because I've done it so much. But in the early years, you know, I wasn't as fit as I am now. And so it forced me, like, oh, I want to do the Canadian Ski Marathon. Well, in October, I better go do a run because, you know, I need to be in shape to start skiing in December. And so I couldn't afford to be lazy in October. And so the rewards there, you know, are not so much, there's of course the fact that I did it and I've done it for 30 times, but it's more over the many, well, decades, I dare say, over the many years, it's kind of made me who I am and it's shaped my life. And that's, for me, that's a big reward, right? And I could be here today as a 60-year-old man and I'm still doing this. So it's so cool to me and humbling, you know, so.
Yeah, totally. I was reading in the bio that you had sent Marianne and you described yourself as a bit of a leader. So how would you say that your experience outdoors and all the stuff that you've done and trained for and accomplished has, you know, led to you being a leader, like professionally, like in your work life? In
my work life. So thankfully I don't work professionally anymore. So I could do more stuff. But there was in North America, we're very defined by our careers and what we do during that 8-hour day from 9 till 5 or whatever, as opposed to other cultures where, you know, they might define you by different things. But certainly in the Western world, we're kind of defined about who we are. And so I couldn't avoid it being a big part of my life. And then, you know, slowly over time, you know, I became someone who was, in senior manager in a big company kind of thing. And I was noticing that my outdoor experience was a huge impact into, I think, one of the reasons I was successful. And it's, again, a bit corny to say perhaps, but I think from a very young age, because I had so much experience in the outdoors, when I was in that setting, I tended to naturally be, you know, the mini leader in the outdoor setting. And I kind of learned to accept, especially as you know, as a guy from my generation, that it was okay to care for people and to show that you cared for people. Because when you're outside, you know, if you have more skills than someone, it's part of your responsibility to care for them and to help them, to guide them along and make sure they do the right thing and that they're safe. And so that kind of personality and kind of mindset, it kind of went into my professional life. And I think that was a big help. And then there's the more kind of practical side of things, where I think when you're outside, especially if you're doing an endurance event with someone else, knowing what your goals are is really important. And often in the workplace, I think it's hard for leaders to have clarity with what goals are with people. And it's something that I always made sure that we understood what the goals were. And it kind of came from my world, you know, in the outdoors. Then of course, goals change, you know, circumstances change. If you're going on a multi-day hiking trip, you know, it may seem trite, but, you know, you have to reach a certain campsite that day. Maybe that day you can't reach that campsite and, you know, the plan has to change. Well, if you're leading a little group, you know, you better make sure everybody understands and has bought in and understand that it's maybe not serious, that you're going to do something to mitigate the risk and all that stuff. So all these things I was kind of noticing, I could bring these things into, you know, professional life where I was working in a more complex environment, one could say, than, you know, being outside. But all the same ideas, because it's still people, right? And so all the same ideas applied. And I think it really helped me get along with people in a nice way and be kind of I hope, you know, a good leader when I was working.
Yeah. You've said it a few times throughout this, is that you describe yourself as lazy. And I would say that you're the opposite of that. So how does this lazy person that you describe yourself as end up doing these really epic feats for most of your life? Because like it doesn't add up for me.
Yeah, I know. And you know, it's interesting because you said most of my life, which maybe now it seems that way, but I wasn't always like this. So I tell this little joke, little story, which is sadly a true story. There was a time when I was having a shower and I could not see my toes for the wrong reason. There was something in the way of my toes. And I was picturing myself as this 40-year-old guy who was going to get a heart attack one day playing squash. And it's a very true moment. I did have that moment in the shower one day. Right. So in my 20s, you know, I struggled with motivation. I think because I was mildly athletic, things had come, you know, a little bit easy. But most of the sports I played were like team sports, where skill can overcome, you know, you know, being out of shape or whatever, because it's a kind of a team concept. And then as I got involved in the outdoors, you know, I could only rely on myself. And I had this fantasy that maybe one day I would run a marathon, but I didn't see how I could possibly do it because I was lazy, and I would try running and it would last a couple of weeks and then I would give up. And then one year, two things happened. It was the first year that I did the Canadian ski marathon that I just described. And I finally ran the Ottawa Marathon. It was painful. It took me a long time. But afterwards, I was kind of like, my God, I can do this. And I think because of the Canadian ski marathon, I started to imagine a different life for myself. And one of the things was, you know, I would see some of these older folks who were still doing stuff and were stronger than I was, and they were twice my age. And I was kind of imagining that one day I was going to look back and say, you know, I don't want to say I wasted my life, but I could have done more with it. And now it's too late. And I did kind of have that a bit of an epiphany, I guess. And I thought, you know, I've got to overcome it. And there was this with the passion for hiking and being outside that were kind of coming together. And I thought, I've got to, and I think it's important for me to talk about, because a lot of folks, they see me on Strava or whatever, and they see how much, like, I do a lot of training. I don't look like I'm a lazy person right now, but they don't realize that it's actually, I don't go running at 5:30 in the morning like some folks do, because I'm too lazy to be blunt. And it's still a struggle today, and people don't want to believe it. But the passion that I have for doing something, big is so strong that I work to overcome my laziness, because the idea that I could run 100 miles in British Columbia in the Rockies, to me, is so amazing that when I see that, I go, wow, that is such an amazing thing. If only I would go run today. And I sometimes it's on a weekly basis. Like, it's not just, I continuously have to like work at it.
That's so interesting. I can relate so much to what you just said about someone like running better than you that's twice your age, because last summer I did a run in Kicking Horse, and it was like up a double black, Diamond Mountain. At one point, I think we were like kilometer 12 or 13, and I was just like really dragging my butt. I've been a runner my whole life, but this just was like kicking my ass. It was like 30 degrees out. I was like just grinding it. And then this guy who was literally twice my age, like I would guess he was probably about 60, so light on his feet, boom, just passes me. And he's like, hi, just smiling, like waving at me. And I was like, friggin' goals, first of all. But secondly, like, that's going to be me, hopefully, when I'm 60. Like, I only just want to get better and better. And that's kind of what is in my head when I'm sitting on the couch being like, I don't really want to run. I'm like, no, I don't want to run right now, but I know that I'm going to feel so much better after. And hopefully one day I'll be that badass 60-year-old.
I had, so when I was 31 years old, I actually remember the age, I was doing my first ski marathon. And in those days, tights were a relatively new thing. It was hard to go to buy a pair of tights, was not easy to do. And so I was doing a ski marathon, and I was on the 10th section. I was finishing the Sunday. I had it done. I was so happy. And I had my little black tights on, and I had a little fanny pack, had modern ski boots on. And I was taking off, and I was starting on a lake, and there was this big lake that we had to cross. And I was behind this old grizzly guy who had a huge pack on and wool pants and all this old stuff, and I was skiing behind him, and I was so excited. And I was da-da-da-da-da. After about 5 minutes, I was like, oh, this guy's skiing. Ooh, shoot, I better let him go. And I was like, man, he's got wool pants on. He looks like he's an old man. And 30 years later, it's me.
And it's not the gear that makes you an athlete too, right? Like, I've for sure seen that. And I'm like, that girl's wearing like a cotton t-shirt and like old basketball shorts, but that doesn't matter. She's kicking my ass right now.
Yeah.
I think we live in a region too, like in Gatineau and Ottawa, where like there's so many elite lifelong athletes that it can, whether it's running, hiking, skiing, like there's always someone who is much faster, stronger than you. Well, that's what keeps me going, and I know that's what keeps Vicky going too, like she just described. So I think we live in a very good region that fuels each other.
I agree, and I came here from Montreal, big city life, and like a lot of Montrealers, I loved Montreal. I thought, I'll come here for a couple of years for my work, and I'll go back to Montreal. And I discovered something called Gatineau Park, and
never heard of it.
Gatineau Park. And I started cycling. The quality of the road biking was just phenomenal. And like you said, everyone here, well, with Old Chelsea and with Gatineau Park, a lot of former Olympic athletes live in the area. And I think because it's the capital and, funding source probably for high-end athletes who are even going to the Olympics and things like cross-country skiing, or biathletes, some of these, kind of different kind of sports. And Gatineau Park being there as an amazing cross-country ski center. The standards are very high here, and you have to keep, stay humble and realize that, like, we're all people trying to enjoy the park, and there's always someone slower and someone faster, and it's kind of irrelevant, right? It's just we're out there trying to be healthy and have fun and enjoy being outside. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So we did touch on this a little bit, but this is our final question to you, and that is, why is it so important for you to have a network of like-minded people, outdoorsy people, you know, in your life?
It's funny because we just talked about Ottawa, and I mean, isn't Ottawa great, right, in that respect? I think it's got that right level of being, you know, being a city where you have a lot available to you, but it's, you know, not necessarily like some of the bigger cities that we have, where there's much more of a chance that we all kind of know each other, you know, in Ottawa. And in my early years, you know, I was really seen as an odd duck because of the way that I lived my life. And I think from a mental health perspective, and from kind of being satisfied with the way that you live your life, you know, most of us want to have a sense of belonging, and I think it helps. I know in my early years when I was doing some of this stuff and it wasn't as popular, you know, people would make fun of me. It was like I was this weird guy, and people were not in a subtle way at all. And it's, even though you might be, you know, you might have a lot of good self-confidence, it's always not easy to overcome, especially when it's like, it's never ending. Whereas in Ottawa, you have this opportunity, especially nowadays, to have these people around you that are like-minded. And it gives you this really nice sense of I belong when I do this. And it's great to be able to chat, you know, with other people about this stuff. And I do, you know, because I've done it for a long time, I think Marianne knows I can talk about this stuff forever. I just love chatting about this stuff.
I actually just got the warning saying that we're just about to run out of time, but I just extended it. We're good.
I need to have the clock in front of me, and I forgot to do that actually, because I can talk a lot. Yeah, so you know, I think from a mental health and from being like peaceful with yourself, I think it helps to have friends and have other people, even though you know, they might not be great friends, but they're people that you know that are doing the same stuff. And now with things like Strava or whatever, you know, I'm not a big social media guy, but having this connection with other people is just, it's people are so supportive, right? So it's nice.
Rial, thank you so much for taking time with us today.
Thank you.
And
awesome. You're very, sorry, Mary. I was just gonna say it's super inspiring. Like coming into this, I was like, this is a little bit weird. Like, I don't really know this person. And like, I was a little bit, not nervous, just like, I didn't really know what to expect. And I have to say, like, I just feel really inspired. And now I just want to go for a run and be outside. So thank you.
Thank you. It's very humbling. I'll see you on Strava.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. I enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Rial. We appreciate it.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.